So I wanted to welcome Paulette here for the very first time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And this is Grace Gallery. If you guys have not heard of me before, I know that Jack has, I know that Mandy has, but a lot of you are new here that don't know of my existence and that probably never have. But I've been in existence now for 5 years, going on 6 years in May. This is the first event so far this year for 2020. I opened my gallery up again in March. I actually am closed the months of December, January, and February. So that's my off season. Now my season has begun again, and I'll be having regular First Fridays. This event itself is called First Friday. The author is an aspect of First Fridays under the cover of author speaking series. So what you have is an author who's going to talk about her book, and she's going to read a couple lines from her book, maybe a chapter if you're lucky, and she'll also tell you what got her to write about the book, her passions about the book, and she'll sign it, and you can meet and greet with her, which you've already done, but you can do again afterward. And if there's any questions after she's finished, then by all means, go ahead and ask any questions you may have. And if there's any other questions for me, you can go ahead and ask me after she's finished as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, thank you all very, very much for coming. It means a lot to see some wonderful friends and family show up again. Thank you so much for coming. It really means a lot to me. And thanks to Aidan for having me. It's wonderful. And nice to see that the Grace Gallery got some really good press out of this. So I'm very happy for you, Aidan, for that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So the book. Where did this book come from? It really did start from a really dark, terrible place. My experiences in the RCMP, even though I've made it all the way through the 30 years, from almost the moment I started, there was some challenges as I started my career. For those of you who've already read the book, you're well aware what those challenges were. But from the first get-go, imagine showing up at a brand new place for the very first time away from home and not feeling really well, not feeling accepted, not being wanted. And yet, this is my dream job. This was the dream job that I've dreamt ever since I was 6 years old. This was the job I wanted to do. So you can imagine the excitement, the joy, the proud, being so proud to finally be accepted and getting into the RCMP, only to find out that you really weren't wanted. So that, along with a lot of different experiences and voyages, took me to a place where back in 2016, the RCMP, there was a class action lawsuit against the RCMP for discrimination against women, for sexual harassment of women in the workplace. For a long time I debated whether or not I would actually come forward or not, even though I had been asked to be one of the forefront of the people to come forward. I was debating that because what had happened to me was personal, very deeply personal, and I wasn't sure I was ready to share it yet. I had not shared my story with anyone, including my family. And the first time they found out about it was when I wrote the book. Okay, so I sent a copy of the book, a rough draft, to my family, to my parents, my brothers and sisters, and that was the first time they found out, because we don't talk about it. So what the book is hoping to do is to help other people, male and female, both in the RCMP and in a male-dominated occupation. Could be a firefighter, could be a plumber, could be something that's not traditionally a woman, to show them that, yes, you're not the only one going through a really hard time, and that it's possible to make it through and to survive. That no matter how deep and dark it gets, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we can make it through. So my hope and pray for the book is to get as much exposure to it as possible for people out there who are considering a job in a male-dominated occupation or within a police department, to show them some of the challenges that they may face. So that was the reason for the book, and as a result, all of the proceeds of the book I always believe in giving back. All of the proceeds of the book are going to the National Service Dogs, because what better way to give back? To a good cause. So if we can help somebody get a dog, and I have very dear friends here. Don't cry. I have very dear friends here who have donated a dog to the National Dog Service. Cheryl and her husband Carlo have donated one of their pups, and that dog I helped raise from a little teeny weeny thing, and to hope someday see it become a dog for someone who needs help, whether it's post-traumatic stress, whether it's autism, whether it's whatever it is. So that's the reason for the book. So thank you very much. I know those of you who have read it, I appreciated your feedback. It's a very powerful book for me because it's so personal. But having said that, it's a great message for a lot of great people to have. So thank you again for that opportunity, and thank you all very much for coming tonight. It really means a lot. Thank you.
I'll have to
One of the stories is, as you'll find out once you read the book, part of my world was being an undercover police officer. That doesn't mean I just worked in plain clothes. It means that I worked in an undercover capacity to either buy drugs, guns, whatever it may be. But my specialty was drugs. So one day we were going in to do a drug raid. We had a Crime Stoppers report that the people were selling crack cocaine in an apartment in Niagara Falls. We also had information that there was a gun in the apartment that we were going to. As we go up to the apartment, there's a door, of course, an apartment door, and you've got to get through the door. You know, you got to get someone to buzz you in. So that was our first challenge. How are we going to get through this door? Just as it so happens, two men and a woman are coming through and they're opening the door. And we took advantage of that and held the door open. Little did we know that that was actually the targets. Those were the people we were going in to do the search warrant for. So we decided to stay back for a minute. So well, let's just wait and let them guys go ahead. Now they must have heard us say that and must have thought that was really strange. Let them go ahead. So we waited a minute and then we go up to the apartment. They always let me knock on the door first. Everybody will open the door for a girl.
Yeah.
Because back then, traditionally, women were not well known as being police officers. It was usually men, 6'2", 250 pounds with a mustache. And I didn't fit that role. I was young, I looked young, and I'm awfully short. Me and 6'2" will never ever see the light of day. So anyway, I knock on the door and the fellow opens the door and I ask if I can buy some crack cocaine. And he opens the door and starts to walk in, so I follow him. What I didn't realize at the time, and I'll explain this in a bit, so as I walk in and follow him, the rest of the team, the search team, are coming in behind us. Police, everyone put up your hands, right? Search warrant. And I'm standing beside this one gentleman, and as we say search warrant, he reaches into his pants and he pulls out a gun. Now my first reaction was just to jump on him, which I did. Could I have shot him? Yes, I could have. He pulled out a gun on me. He had every intent of using it. But I jumped on him, knocked him to the floor. My partner got his gun away. And I'm standing there with my foot on his back and my leg is going like this. And he must have thought I was kicking him, but the adrenaline of having a gun pulled on me was just so much. My leg was literally shaking as I'm standing on top of him. What we failed to realize is that they must have known we were coming. Because after hindsight, we took some time to actually just, look at the situation. There were bullets from the front door all the way to where he was. We figured he was trying to load his gun from the front door as we were going in. He knew we were coming up the stairs to get him. So that was one of my undercover experiences in which, people say, is it dangerous? Very dangerous. Are there guns? Lots of guns. I've been shown more weapons as a female undercover because the guys are trying to show me, like, look at me, look how tough I am. And of course, the hardest part is you've been trained. You take a gun, you go, okay, it works really good. But when you're in an undercover, you almost got to go, oh, that is pretty, what is that in there? You almost have to play dumb because you can't be showing them that you're very proficient with a firearm. So a lot of times people would show me their weapons, show me their knives, show me their guns, brag about things. I'll tell you a story about it, one more story, and then I'll leave it for questions if you like. I did an undercover job up in Northern Ontario, and this gentleman was involved in the sale of cocaine, and he was distributing the cocaine from Sudbury, Ontario, all the way to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So I had a cover story. I would fly up on a two-seater plane, rent a car, and drive to a certain location so this gentleman and I could try to do a drug transaction. That whole time he decided, I guess, and back then you have to understand I had nice long hair. Yeah, looked really pretty, I guess, because I'll tell you that story in a minute. But anyway, I'm gonna have nice long curly hair, and I'm trying to buy the drugs from him. And he finally makes an agreement. We're gonna buy an ounce of cocaine from him for about $3,000. Okay, sounds like a plan. But he was trying to impress me, and the whole time he was telling me, he was telling me of how he knew all the drug routes. He told me all his drug routes. Told me about the time he blew up an OPP cruiser. Talked about corrupt police officers. So this guy was pretty well involved in the drug trade. Let's put it to you this way. He was arrested. 2 years later, I go back to court. I was told his defense was going to be I was la femme fatale. That he thought he was in love with me and he was trying to just woo me by telling me all these stories. And he only sold me the drugs because he loved me. 2 years later, I show up and I'm almost a skinhead. He went from the femme fatale to I'm drunk, Your Honor. I was drunk the time I sold it to him. And that is exactly what happened in this case in the North. I went from being the femme fatale to the drunk guy's date. So that's how much fun it can be sometimes too. So anyway, those are two of the little stories that are in the book. They're probably in a little bit more detail, but that's two cute stories that I think you'll enjoy reading. Some of the bad stories you'll read, you don't need me to cry again, so I'll leave that to you to read. After all is said and done, any questions or anything I can help answer from the crowd?
I just know that I'm very proud of you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Very,
much.
very.
Thank you.
And I wish my mother was still here to hear that you've written a book. A book.
Yep, absolutely.
And, you know.
Yeah, I think she'd have been very proud too, Sharon.
Mhm.
Yeah, your mom was a real sweetheart. We miss her dearly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Anything else?
Do you offer suggestions regarding like how to change the culture?
So as a result of coming forward, I've become a bit of a mentor for a lot of the women who have gone forward with the class action lawsuit. I have a lot of people that call and text and ask for advice. And I've become a mentor on one of the websites for female RCMP officers. Even though I'm retired now, I've come forward as a mentor to help people either learn a little bit more about the job or deal with tough situations such as we've dealt with throughout our careers, with being discriminated and harassed. So I've become a bit of a mentor and a person to go to for help and advice, so yes.
But I think you and my mother probably talked because I think, I mean, she worked as a correctional officer at Maplehurst, my mother.
Yes.
And she worked with all men.
Yeah, we talked
So you
lots.
probably had quite some conversations with her that I
Absolutely.
didn't know about, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Do police forces encourage a speaker like yourself to come in and as part of a wellness program or?
I'd like to see that happen more, Cheryl. I used to teach ethics, and ethics was a very difficult subject to teach because a lot of people, they say, well, talk to the lower end of the, talk to the constables, talk to the working men and women. They need to know about it. And in reality, sometimes it's the senior management that really needs to hear what's being said. And a lot of times people would say to me, Paulette, why aren't you talking to senior management like you're talking to us? And I tell them the truth, because they don't want to hear it.
Really?
They're not open to that yet. A lot of times, the working men and women down on the bottom doing the day-to-day jobs are fairly ethical. They understand right from wrong, they know what they need to do. there's a certain time and level of frustration that comes along with dealing with the courts. How many times do you have to arrest the same person for beating his wife, or for being a drunk driver, or whatever the offense is? It's usually the same people over and over and over that you arrest. And then you get the judge who gets mad at you. Why are you bringing this person back to my court? Why aren't you keeping this person in custody? Right? So it's a vicious circle. And you can see where some officers, after a point in time, get very frustrated with the legal system. You know, I used to think the Americans had the best legal system in the world. They have some of the best sentences in the world, not necessarily one of the best legal systems in the world. I think our legal system in Canada is very good, but we're very conservative when it comes to sentencing. So that's a challenge that we have to face. We need to get, so people have said to me, okay, Paulette, we've got a female RCMP officer who's now the commissioner of the RCMP. Things will change. And I said, no, you've set her up for failure. You haven't given her any authority or any power that you gave anybody else. You've put her in the position to fail because a lot of people have an expectation, because she's a woman, that she can make changes, but they haven't given her any powers, any authorities to make legislative changes that are required in order for her to do and make changes to create a better RCMP. So she will fail. And it's sad to say that, but I think the answers to changing the RCMP are very simple. You get caught, you lose your job, you lose your pension, you lose your benefits. How do you make your mortgage payments? How do you support your wife and kids? And if there's a serious enough consequence to the actions taken, it'll stop. But we're not prepared, and it takes legislative changes to make that happen. And at this point in time, you know how hard it is to suspend an officer without pay? It's almost impossible.
Yeah, that's
It's almost impossible. We've had officers who have been suspended on pay for years. Where's the incentive to change? It's not there yet. And it's not just the RCMP. The Ontario Provincial Police Act is written the exact same way. It's very difficult to change legislation, and that's what it takes to make policing more accountable. That's what we need. If we could do that, then you'd make for a much better police service all the way around, no matter which one you're looking at.
When the RCMP, they had a civilian become head of it at one point, didn't they? And so you were saying they put the female in charge and they haven't made any changes, so the same thing when they put the civilian in charge, it was just an optic thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was. Pretty much, the problem is that our policies and procedures don't allow us to fire someone. It's not an easy process. We used to jokingly said you could probably do anything short of murder and you still couldn't get fired in the RCMP. A lot of times we have an internal process of investigating. That process sometimes, though, if the person is within retirement age, that person could retire and the internal process, investigative process, terminates once the employee ends his career. So even though, I always say the RCMP will investigate any criminal offense except for the ones we commit ourselves. Okay? Yeah.
Do you think the discrimination has gotten any better?
There's been some improvement, but there's been, a lot of people say once the old dinosaurs retire from the RCMP, it'll get better. We're hiring the next dinosaur tomorrow. It's a thought process. It's the way people feel. And if someone comes in and has already a predisposed disposition about how they feel about men or visible minorities, that's going to come in with them. And there's nothing you can do to change them. That's the way they were brought up, they were raised, or they've learned. And if you hire someone with those beliefs, it's not going to change. Yep. And now we're bringing a lot more visible minorities who have come in from other countries and have their own sets of beliefs. And that's a challenge. It is, it's really a challenge.
Do we have to gear to them,
Immigration.
to their beliefs? Like, do we have to?
Well, we have our policies and procedures, and that's what we're geared to. So
That's
even
it,
though
that's
you
all.
come in and you have a belief of such and such,
Doesn't matter.
right? Like we've had officers, for example, with the Toronto Police Service who said, I refuse to work when we had issues with the abortion clinics. He said, I'm a Christian, I believe in pro-life, and I refuse to work at an anti-abortion clinic. Well, sorry, your job says that your job is to protect the public. And if your job is to protect the public at an anti-abortion clinic, that's what you do, that's what you're paid to do.
Yeah.
And your beliefs have to take a back seat. Because our policies and procedures is what we are guided by. Does that mean that someone doesn't? It's, you know, it happens,
Yes.
it does. But really, what's supposed to be our guiding principles is the policies and procedures of what we're to do. And that's to protect the public. And you may not like the job, you may not like the fact that you're at a place that you don't necessarily believe in, your personal beliefs aren't there, it's your job to do. I mean, they had an officer once who said, I refuse to work Sundays because I'm a Christian. I don't want to work Sundays. He's no longer employed. It was easy. You either work when we tell you to, or if you refuse to do your job, then you're no longer a police officer. So.
But they can commit a crime and still get paid.
Well, like you say, and I say that in some areas of what I've seen in my experiences,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we've had people that have been under investigation for complaints of harassment or sexual harassment, and once that individual retires, the internal investigation that the RCMP conducts finishes. It's not a criminal investigation, it's an internal
Yeah.
investigation. They're two different things.
Mm.
And like I say, if someone were to come to the front desk and say, I've been sexually assaulted, we would investigate as a criminal offense.
Oh, yeah.
If it happens within the RCMP and it's reported, there's some, is it gonna be done internally? Should it be done externally? Should we have an external review or investigative body? And that's one of the things they're looking at, is having some kind of an external, there's already an external review board that oversees the RCMP, but I mean, what are their powers? What can they do? So, like I say, to me, I see the need for legislative change that'll force the RCMP or any other police service to have an external review, a criminal investigation if it's a criminal matter, and not be used as an internal review or internal investigation. So, those are some of the hopes that if I see any change coming, those are the ones that I think
Should-
must change, otherwise nothing will ever change.
Yeah.
Have you seen a jump in harassment coming forward to you now that you're a mentor and that you're speaking on the subject?
I don't know if I've seen a jump per se, but I'll tell you right now that when the class action lawsuit first started, I think a lot of jaws dropped when over 3,000 women came forward.
Holy.
Yeah, I think they expected 100, maybe a couple hundred, 500 at the most.
Do you think the Me Too movement had any impact on it?
Believe it or not, I believe the RCMP was way ahead of the Me Too movement. When the women that came forward, they came forward before the Me Too movement ever came into existence. My concern with the Me Too movement is you have to stand up for something, not everything. And when they stood up and were quite upset about the Christmas song, "It's Baby, It's Cold Outside," I mean, I
Ridiculous.
lost all credibility in that movement, because what are you standing up for? You have to stand up for one solid thing and stick with it. If you spread yourself out too thin, you lose your momentum. And the U2 movement, I think, is a great thing, but if they spread themselves out too thin, then they've lost what they really stood for in the first place. And I think some people get really upset with that Christmas thing being a really big, well, let's all stand up and fight this Christmas song. No, it's about something far more serious than a song.
Yeah.
And there's even more serious songs than that. That's
Oh.
that's pretty low on the seriousness
Yeah.
scale.